Ed Uszynski and Brian Smith, welcome to Let's Parent on Purpose. Good to meet you guys.
Good to be here, Jay.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Jay.
All right. And so this will be interesting because most of mine are one-on-one, or at least the two people are beside each other on the other end. So we're going to trust the Lord to help our three-part conversation. Ed, where are you residing right now?
I'm just outside of Dayton, Ohio, in a town called Xenia.
Okay. All right. I'm from Huntington, West Virginia, so not too far out of your woods.
Yeah.
And Brian, what about you?
Yep, I'm just outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan, in a small town called Lowell.
Okay. So I got a copy, an advanced copy of your book, Away Game, and it has really resounded with me as a parent who's had a couple boys in youth sports culture, one currently playing high school basketball, and just seeing this constant tug of war that you have of more, like, and the anxiety that comes with it, the desperation that comes with it, some of the character development for just toxicity that's a part of it. So I'm really excited to unfold this conversation. As we get into it, just curious, what is your particular sports backgrounds? And then maybe where are you parenting-wise? What are your kids involved in?
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I ran track and cross country at Wake Forest University. I ended up running because I got cut from everything else in high school, so didn't start running until sophomore year in high school and ended up being pretty decent at it. I have 3 kids, a soon-to-be freshman in high school who plays every sport imaginable besides the sport that I played, cross country. And then I have a daughter who runs track and a younger son who he plays everything as well. So he's done football, basketball, and he's in soccer right now.
All right.
And I grew up with a high school football coach, actually, just outside of Cleveland. My dad was a football coach, but I got good at basketball. And so basketball became my thing. I played overseas a little bit. I went way further with getting to play into my 20s than I ever thought that I would. And Amy and I have 4 kids. One actually just finished playing college basketball. 2 played soccer and volleyball. They didn't play the collegiate level. And then I have an 8th grader who, like Brian's saying, he plays everything. And so we're still kind of in the thick of it.
So one thing that's good to just establish from the get-go, this is not a conversation among parents that are anti-sports or anti-youth sports. We've all got kids very much in the mix. But I would say we've noticed something really broken in the system. And you guys in your book, I don't know if you coined this term, but I've never heard it before and I loved it, the youth sports industrial complex. And I would love for you to unpack, what do you mean by that term? It's such a good one, youth sports industrial complex.
Yeah, Jay, maybe we should throw this out on the table for the audience as well. Brian and I met each other because we work for a sports ministry called Athletes in Action.
Okay.
And so we've spent combined over 50 years of our vocational life working with college and professional athletes in the realm of evangelism and discipleship, trying to help them learn how God intersects their sport. He's not this separate category for them. So he and I have been working together for the last 10 years in that context. But then as we became parents and we started coaching also, we just recognized there's a bunch of different resources to help college level athletes that are made by Athletes in Action, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, other organizations like that. But there's literally nothing out there, very, very little, to help parents recognize what's going on the youth sports level. And I do think we came up with that. I think almost jokingly, 7-8 years ago, we started referring to the youth sport industrial complex, this machine that's become a $1 billion industry that is just carrying us through our year. It dominates our schedule. It captures our mind and our wallet, our pocketbook. That was the thing that we mostly talked about, is just how much it costs to participate in sports. And so, yeah, we've been bantering for a long time about what that is, and just finally decided to put words down on paper. Brian, what else would you say about where that came from for us?
Yeah, I remember us coming up with the phrase in conversation, but in doing research for the book, I think his name is Adam Metz. He wrote a book called Elite, and it's kind of like a Christian manifesto for youth sports. And he did use the phrase youth sport industrial complex in there. So I want to give a shout out
Okay.
to Pastor Adam Metz there. Yeah, I would double down on we both love sports. Heavily involved in it. Our kids play it. It's been a huge part of both of our lives. And so for the listeners to know, you are reading or potentially listening to a book from people who like, we're not calling to get rid of sports at all. We're calling what would it look like to live more faithfully within a broken system. And so to add to what Ed already said, the youth sport industrial complex, maybe more than anything else to understand it's a system that views our kids as commodities, views and treats our kids as commodities. So what can I get out of this young athlete that will benefit me and my brand and my team? And oftentimes when we view kids as, probably all the time, right? When we view kids as commodities, we're not doing what's best for them. Oftentimes we're doing what's best for us. And us would be the adults and the grown-ups in the rooms.
That's really big. It's really easy to see, well, okay, I see what Nike gets out of this, and I see what some of these coaches that are, racking in the money get out of it. But if we're going to be honest, that there's a lot of parental ego tied up in the athletic performance of their kids. And so I think that, it's very easy for me to say, oh, well, this sport or this league is using my kid as a commodity. It's a lot harder to turn the mirror on myself and say, but am I using my child as a commodity? Have I wrapped up what I think people think of me in the performance of my child in whatever this sport is? What do you guys think about that?
Well said, Jay. And as we were writing this book, we'll probably talk about this all the time for the next couple of years, that there was some debate as to what exactly the content of the book should be. And some wanted it really just to be purely a discipleship curriculum for the kids. And Brian and I have continued to argue for the idea that the first person that needs to be discipled in this discussion is us.
Yeah.
It's the parents. Because we've been impacted by sport culture to think in a certain way about ourselves, about our kids, about our relationship to other people. Identity is a huge topic that still affects us as adults in this world. So in every chapter of the book, we take some time to say, hey, think about where you're at in relationship to this idea, and how did you come to start thinking this way? And we need to reform that as we're trying to coach, if you will, or disciple our kids to think differently about sport. We got to get our own head and heart right.
I was thinking as you were talking, I started this podcast because I realized, man, I'm a heck of a lot better youth pastor when there's a spiritually engaged mom and dad. And so this was a way for me to get in the ears of the moms and dads in my church. And then just, it's helpful for other people as well. But I think both parents and coaches oftentimes, or like youth pastors and coaches, kind of sometimes have the same experience of parents that just drop their kid off. You're expected to do that. But then on the other side, you have these certain ones that are so aggressive at trying to plow through every obstacle that their kid may face, that, whether it's using influence or badgering or whatever it is, that it really, what I see is like it impedes the development of the child. And I see that sometimes in the spiritual world, but I know that's absolutely the case in the sports world. And it's something you guys talked about, how, what was the terms, helicopter parenting then turned into snowplow parenting. And what do you guys observe in the youth sports world in regards to snowplow parenting?
Yeah, you can observe it just by showing up at any Saturday at a soccer field, and you can see and listen to what's going on as parents are shouting from the sidelines, go, pass, shoot, no, don't do that, faster. So it's almost this like overwhelming environment that we're putting kids in, and what it's doing, kind of the slow snow plow parenting, is it's inhibiting kids from thinking on their own when it comes to sports. And that's one of the beautiful things we talk about in the book that sports allows our kids to do. If we back off a little bit, it allows them to think on their feet, It allows them to try new things. It allows them to fail, hopefully in a grace-based environment. And it allows them, most importantly, to learn from what just happened and maybe try something different the next time. But if we're always coaching and always directing from the sidelines and putting them in the next opportunity, the next travel league thing, and telling them when to pass and when to shoot, we're really doing them a disservice because we're not allowing them to grow into their creative self who God created them to be.
Yeah, you gave some pushback on that idea that sports builds character. And that's one that I've heard, and it's probably one that I've said. And so I'd like to give you an opportunity because you were resistant that just sports automatically builds character. So what's your resistance?
Well, we don't want to overly complicate it, but the reality is characters develop based on the people that are teaching it. So the act of running, the act of participating in a baseball game or a volleyball match is not necessarily going to teach me to love people well. Might just do the opposite, actually. But you actually need an intervention. We use that word a lot. There needs to be an intervention where usually an adult in the case of youth sports, but sometimes even just a really mature kid, that says, this is the way to go. This is the way to act. This is the way to treat somebody. This is the way to think about yourself in the midst of a hard time or a loss. This is how we're going to set our goals. They're not going to be just contingent on the scoreboard, but how we step onto the field and how we carry ourselves. Somebody has to teach that for that to happen. So in some ways, I suppose in some ways we're just being a little bit clever, but the reality is it's about the people, the coaches, the administrators, the parents that are involved or not involved.
Yeah, I've observed as a parent sitting on the sideline in school games. So these are high school games. And I understand by the high school level, it's supposed to be competitive. It's not a like participation trophy where everybody gets playing time. But one of the things that's really troubling to me is every coach at every middle school and high school is in some element an employee of the county. Now,
Right.
if the math teacher berated students in their class, or the science teacher berated students in their class, personally insulted them, told them like what a joke they are, how derogatory, yelled at them in front of a bunch of other people, I think that teacher would be fired immediately. And yet it is just absolutely common and acceptable in the coaching world. And I just I'm looking at these teams. I'm like, I don't see anybody that's going to be making their money off of professional playing one day. But I do see a bunch of young men that are being forged into something. And here's somebody that has an incredible opportunity for influence. And they're telling them that this is an acceptable way for an adult man to act. And for me, that's really heartbreaking. And you guys probably have experienced the same thing where the behavior that coaches are allowed is something that it's not allowed in any other element of life, but it is so primarily forging and shaping our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're calling for in this book is not how to get your local coach fired or how to confront your local coach. There may be a place for that at times, but even in that broken system where we have a coach who's maybe they're trying to live vicariously through these athletes and they're saying things that they should, at least doing things in an unchristianly way, right? What that does for us as parents is it gives us a really good opportunity on the back end of seeing those things take place in a game or in a practice, is to have great discipleship conversations with our kids. And that's what we're trying to argue for in this book is what your youth sport experience is really buying you as a parent is an opportunity to see all of these interactions, all this stuff take place in real time. And then you get to be the person that your kids process all of these interactions with on the back end. So even if you do just have an awful coach, there's still an opportunity there to turn that into a discipleship opportunity where you can help your kid realize what does it look like to submit to a leader when they're acting in really ungodly ways.
It's good, Brian. Yeah.
Go ahead, Ed.
Well, I was going to say sometimes we are that bad coach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We are the parent who has, when you permit when you permit coaches to operate that way towards kids, at some point it becomes almost an endorsement that this is actually the way it should be. I've got all kinds of stories of parents who I think actually got frustrated with me and other coaches when we didn't scream and yell because they felt like we were going soft on the kids or we weren't doing a good enough job of coaching them. Because for so long, the water we've swam in says, you got to scream and yell to get something done. So again, that needs to change first. We need to recognize as parents, actually, that's not okay. Not only is it not okay, but it's actually detrimental to the kids. You might fear them into some kind of performance moment. And again, that happens with Division I athletes and professional where they get feared into it, but it doesn't last. And it doesn't usually work with kids.
Yeah, I've noticed 9 out of 10 kids perform worse when the people close to them start doubting them and start speaking those fears into reality. And I think you got to expect the other team's going to trash talk you. Like they're the opponent, you probably don't know them, or they're your friends and they're going to trash talk you. But when it's your own teammates and when it's your own coach, and that's the thing that's sometimes really funny is like a coach chewing out a team for not being unified when the coach is the primary divider of people into their insecurities. So one of the analogies that you guys use in a away game is you mentioned Babylon from the Bible, and I thought, man, what a brilliant analogy, because there was this very long period of time where the Jewish people were captives in Babylon. Some of them were just born there. They didn't know anything other than that. They did not have an opportunity to leave Babylon and go to Jerusalem. And so they're in a pagan land. And what's interesting, if you read through Daniel, they didn't remove themselves from all functions of Babylon. They were surrounded by ungodly people on a regular basis, but they shined as lights, and they actually helped shape the government and the communities there. And I thought, man, what a great analogy that you guys are drawing with this youth sports industrial complex. Number one is you have to point it out. You have to notice it, because if you don't notice it, you're just going to be a fish swimming in water and not even understand that water's wet. But once you notice it, you can either decide I'm not going to do any more physical activity, or my child's not going to do any more physical activity with any other organized person all through life. Or you have to figure out how to be an exile in Babylon and make a difference. And so I would love to, let's talk about the discipleship opportunities that you guys are drawing out. And I'm not looking at the book right now, but you talk about this idea of sports formation versus, I think, Christian formation. I don't remember the exact words you use, but maybe let's start with that. What is the sports world trying to disciple you into? And maybe what's some of the counters that as parents we could be looking for in being disciples of Christ?
Go ahead, Ed. You can start. I'll add on.
Well, I'll tee it up by saying this, that one of the threads that we talk about that brought us to this point where we're at was the onset in 1979 of ESPN. And ESPN, which again, we all just take for granted now, was really this radical new idea of a medium platform where sports was on 24/7. And so over the course of decades, they've gone way beyond just producing sport programs. There's talk shows, there's ideas that are constantly being talked about to fill in the gaps between games. And there's a value system that's attached to those beliefs. So for example, and I'll just throw one out, I think ESPN has been one of the primary reasons why winning is all that matters. Winning championships is all that matters. If you don't have a chip, if you don't have a certain number of rings, when we're going to talk about who the GOAT is in any particular sport, the very first thing we go to is how many trophies did they get? And all of those, us who have been involved in sports, know that there are so many factors that go into winning a championship that go beyond any one individual performance. And yet that idea that winning is all that matters has permeated now down through the ranks, and it's made its way down to 6-year-old leagues.
Yeah.
That's how we're going to
Yeah.
measure ourselves, is against the win and the loss. As an example, we're being discipled to believe that that's all that matters in life and in sport. So that's one example. Brian, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, what we're doing in the book is we're kind of giving a virtue or a biblical characteristic, and then pinning it against what sport culture teaches instead. So, Ed, what did we pit against love? What was the vice to love that we pitted in the book?
Well, you're just out for yourself. I don't remember what's in
Yeah,
the chapter heading, but
yeah. And
it's
so what
self.
we're doing is we're saying in sport we're being discipled, and our kids are to want to get theirs, to uphold yourself as number one, to always look out for yourself. But the Bible is actually going to show us a better way to live, and that's to have eyes for other people. Jesus was constantly moving in the world in a way in which he saw oftentimes the people that went unnoticed. And so what would it look like for us then as parents, as our kids are playing their youth sporting events, to begin to teach our kids, hey, let's begin to take the focus off self and not worry about how many hits or how many 3-pointers you made or how many touchdowns you scored. And let's maybe have a different metric today, and let's think about, who did you notice today that was hurting, or who do you see that was on the bench today that maybe didn't get as much playing time, and what would it look like to encourage somebody like that? And so to begin introducing a different value system to our kids, and again, like, scoring touchdowns isn't bad, making 3-pointers isn't bad, but our kids will ultimately replicate what we celebrate. And if we're constantly celebrating what ESPN is going to celebrate and the rest of sport culture, we're going to produce kids that all they care about is getting theirs. So what does it look like to inject some of those biblical values into our parent experience?
Yeah, I think it was in that chapter you mentioned even training your kids after the game to go up and thank the referee and to go and thank the people who showed up to watch them play.
Good.
And I know, like, if you lose, it's really hard to get out of your own head. And
Yeah.
it's kind of one of those things, like, in most of these leagues, you have to go shake the hand of the other teammates. But even I've noticed in that, as like, how much low character there is in the handshake after the game. Like,
Good, Jay.
as a coach, I'll go through the line and have kids, like, fake and move their hand away from
Right.
me. And the prize is like, come on, this is like a nothing rec league game. But so many little training opportunities like that. You guys mentioned in ESPN and this whole GOAT debate, there is such a classic, if you have kids in sports, there's such a classic teaching opportunity. I remember the Hall of Fame induction, the year that Michael Jordan and David Robinson were inducted into the Hall of Fame. And somebody has now gone and put this into like a 4-minute clip that goes back and forth between the two, where Jordan, everybody he brings up, he one-ups, old teammates, coaches. I proved you wrong. You didn't believe in me. You didn't put me in this thing. I brought the guy that, beat me on the varsity team here. And even when he talked to his kids, it was like, I feel sorry for you. You got a lot to live up to. They raised the cost of this. I had to pay so much money for you guys to be here. And it would go back on each one of these to David Robinson, who's like thanking every human being who's ever been a part of his life, who names every child by name and pulls out a biblical quality of them, who says to Tim Duncan, have you guys ever prayed really hard for something and the Lord answered it? That's Tim Duncan in my life. And he finishes with a analogy to like being one of the 10 lepers that Jesus healed of leprosy and being the only one to come back and thank him. And it's like, my hope for you is in your life that you could know God like I've been able to know God. And in 4 minutes, it's like, who's the GOAT here? Like, who would you really rather be? Who would you really rather have in your life? But then you go back to the sports talk show. It's all about stats and rings and numbers. And it's hard for kids to discern that difference.
That's interesting. David Robinson never gets talked about on sports radio. I haven't heard his name in a long, long time. It's such a good point. Brian, if we had even thought of that illustration, that'd have been a great way to end the book.
I would have, yeah.
Well, there you go. The next printing, you got your you're in.
It's also right. Like what's a more joyful way to live, to feel like you constantly have to validate yourself in the eyes of other people, or you're constantly looking for ways to uplift other people. So I think, if if we're building that into our kids, we're actually setting them up for success, hopefully in sports, but way beyond that too, because living a gratitude-filled life is such a much more joyful way to live than constantly feeling like you need to one up other people.
Yeah.
And you'll probably have more friends too.
Yeah.
It's possible, and Brian, let's just throw this in here. I feel like we're going to have to keep making this disclaimer. It's not all or nothing. You can pursue excellence. You can pursue championships. You can pursue being the best, and you can still love people in the midst of that.
Right. Yeah.
You can learn how to be very, very disappointed after a game and walk through the line and look the other guy in the eye and actually grab his hand and say, "Good game." You can say that to 11 people as you walk through, and then you can go cry out in the car. You can be upset. But we, again, we tend, I say we as parents, we tend to wind up in this binary world where it's all this or it's all that. You're either participation trophy league or you're an elite select, we're going for everything league. There's no way to live in between with that tension of pursuing championship quality and still looking like Jesus in the midst of it.
I love that. So what are some of the other, what I would call low-hanging fruit? Because oftentimes as a parent, every time I hear a new teaching, I start to feel like I suck even more at all of the other things. And so sometimes if we can say, you know what, these are some simple things as a dad or as a mom whose children are going to be involved in youth sports, middle school or high school sports, here are some simple things that repeated over and over can really have a lasting impact.
Yeah, we just talked about this, but one really easy thing is to begin helping your kid, your young athlete, learn how to recognize the people that are on the margins or the people that are not getting the attention, and give them the questions to ask or the skill set to be able to approach them and make those people feel loved. Like if your kids learn nothing else in their youth sport experience but learning how to see and show value to other people, it's worth whatever money you put into it.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, to be curious, I'll just throw this on the back end of that. I mean, we teach college students this. Be curious about your teammates. You be the one that initiates asking them questions about their lives.
That's good.
You be the one that's interested in where they came from or what their high school was like. Again, we're talking to college athletes, but you can do that even as a kid, especially when you're on these traveling teams where you're with a bunch of different kids who you don't know usually. Be interested in them and see what happens.
Speaking of travel, as a youth pastor, I've had this experience where, it's time to go to church camp and, little Susie, I literally have never had somebody named Susie in my youth group, so I can use Susie for all of my illustrations. Little Susie can't go because they have another tournament this weekend. And, when I talk to Susie, I'm like, well, like how many tournaments a year do you have? 35 to 40. It's like, okay. Well, there's 1 week of church camp a year, and from 6th through 12th grade, that means you have a maximum of 7 opportunities for this, and you have 30 to 35 tournaments a year. Do you really think that you're not going to make it to college because you do 33 tournaments a year instead of 35 tournaments a year?
Wow, that's good, Jay.
But I see this anxiety, and like as a parent of my son is driven. Like he wants to get a college scholarship. I don't know whether he'll do it or not. I truthfully don't care whether he does it or not, but I love getting to be a part of the process of him learning how to set goals and work hard. And it's a ministry opportunity, the kids that have come to church through basketball. But there's this anxiety that is so high in these kids that, if you don't play this sport all year long, then not only are you not going to get to go to college, but you're not even going to be on the school team if this happens. How do you speak to parents who have bought into that same fear structure? What would you speak to them? And then how would you encourage them to speak to their students? Because you guys have worked with thousands of athletes over the years. And so I think you've probably got a really good perspective on this.
Go ahead, Brian. We talk about this all the time. We talk about it all the time.
We do. I mean, we can just go anecdotal evidence. I'm living proof that you don't need to do all that stuff to make it to that level. I ran Division I, and I did not start running until I was a sophomore in high school. And I got there, yes, because I have the God-given gift of endurance. But Ed and I talk about this all the time. You can't teach somebody or buy this it factor where you just have somebody who has a blend of God-given talent, but they also really, really want to work hard, and they don't need mom and dad or a coach to push them. They're the one doing it. Like I would run in the morning at 6 a.m. in the summer, and then I would prune Christmas trees as a summer job for 8 hours, and then I would have afternoon cross-country practice every summer as a high schooler. And I loved it. Like I loved it. I didn't need mom and dad to wake me up or to sign me up for any travel. Like I just wanted to do it. And so I think for parents to know if they really do want their kid to make it, sometimes the best strategy might be to back off a little bit and see if their kids back off too, or if their kids are the ones wanting to press forward. And I think a lot of parents would be surprised to learn that if they backed off, their kid would probably back off too, because
That's
they
really
probably don't want it as much as the parents want it for them. Not all the time, but I think a lot of time that might be the case.
Ed, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, there's this idea too that you have to compete year round. You said that, Jay, and again, Brian, we're gonna have to figure out how we want to talk about this, but that's a lie. It's just a lie. High level coaches actually want athletes who are well rounded in their participation in different sports because it works different muscles. It teaches them different intuition when it comes to athletics. They haven't burned their arm out if they're a pitcher, because they've been throwing so much since they were 9 years old, and that's all they've done. So this idea, again, it's about money. It's about clubs, and it's about coaches wanting to keep control of kids because it's fun for them. It's fun to have a good team of kids that do nothing but come and play in your sandbox, so to speak. But it's not what's best for the kid.
And I would add that it's not what's best for the kid. We read a lot of studies, just like clinical evidence. There still hasn't been one study yet that has proven that early specialization and year-round playing in one sport is best for the kid. In every study that's done, it's always proven to be detrimental to that athlete's future in that sport. But yet we continue to hear it's best to put them in it by coaches
Yeah, and I think you could actually say that is in every area you could study. Mentally, it's not better. Physically, you wear down those joints. And just even, spiritually, it's not better because it's easier for something to become your God if you're worshiping it 350 days a year. So I would say there's literally no aspect where having your child from an early childhood age just be in one sport over and over and over again, especially, if it I went through seasons where I loved basketball so much. I played basketball year round, but not on travel sports. I just loved it. So I had a court in my front yard. We'd find people to play with and we would play. And that free play, that's where you learn to love the game.
That's right.
So, some people can really love the process of training, but if you fall out of love with the game, then all of this, financial and time and effort investment that a parent has made, and all of a sudden their kids hit 10th grade, 11th grade, and they're burnt out and they don't want to do it. And then the parent looks back and says, well, why did I waste all of these weekends and all of this money and everything? It's like, well, that was your choice. Nobody made you do that. And had you been putting that away, your kid's college would probably be paid for already right here. And that's so the other irony of this.
Yeah.
So true. And look, we're not against travel teams. I just finished coaching an AAU basketball team myself that my 8th grade son was on. We had tons of limits on it. We played 4 local tournaments, and we emphasized practice. So there was real intentionality to making that a better experience. But I still wound up feeling, Jay, that it's a better use of time to actually just go play at the Y for 3 or 4 hours on a Saturday than it is to go play, 20 minutes in a game? If you play half the minutes, you're going to play 2 games. You're going to sit there most of the day. Now, there's something fun about hanging out with your teammates and going to eat at Chick-fil-A or wherever.
Right.
And, there's an experience aspect, but that doesn't have anything to do with it being like you're getting better at the sport. If you
Right.
want to get better at the sport, you'd be better just getting a one-on-one trainer. Okay, if you're going to spend money for something, or better still, just go find out where the best kids are playing, drop them off, and let them have at it for 4 hours
Mm-hmm.
and learn the game.
Yeah.
Learn really how to play. Learn how to compete and get to just play like crazy instead of it being structured and limited really in what you wind up doing on the court or whatever the sport is. We need
Love
to
that.
think more about that.
So I feel like this is one of those conversations I could literally have for 8-10 hours because I've been in this world so much. But for the sake of not being on a soapbox for 8 to 10 hours, let's do this as we kind of close it out. What I would love to do, what's your vision, guys? If 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 parents are reading your book and they get it, and they're listening to this conversation and they get it, 6 months down the road, a year down the road, a couple years down the road, what would be your vision of what that would look like in a family's life and in a child's life and maybe even on a team's life?
It's a great question, Jay.
Yeah, I'll start, Ed. We would have families in church communities who begin to show up at sporting events, and watch for opportunities to disciple, and so see things that maybe they wouldn't have seen before. So instead of just looking for all the successes and things that they can fix and tweak, they would be looking at how their kids are interacting with coaches and opponents and teammates, and just instead of always screaming, maybe just sitting there quietly and taking mental notes of like, that's worth a follow-up conversation tonight, or I want to make sure I pay attention to this a little bit more next time to see if I'm seeing trends. So they would watch with more of a discipleship eye, but then too, that they would just take a deep breath and enjoy the God-given gift of sport and the opportunity to watch their kid play, because it's really, really fun to watch your kid play sport if you release it from all of this. They're playing because they need to get to X, Y, or Z. If you can just release yourself from the what if and just watch and enjoy it, it is a beautiful, beautiful thing. And again, it's not always going to be binary categories. We're probably going to have this like, I really want them to, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But to emphasize, man, just enjoy watching your kid play. Put your phone down, stop screaming, be quiet for a little bit, and just smile and watch your kid go at it.
And take that to the car ride home. Ask them if they want to talk about the game, and if they don't, as Brian says this all the time, turn the radio on and go get ice cream.
Yeah.
Okay. So Brian's been saying this since the day we started writing it, is that I'll just add some more color to your vision, Brian. Brian talked about we want to see this in churches, where youth groups, where pastors like you have this resource and are able to, it gives you language to start having a conversation about how we as a community, not only do we as individuals within the community want to start operating differently, but we want to create a different kind of accountability even amongst ourselves, that we'll start to approach our kids and sport differently than what we're being taught to do. Not in a judgmental way, not in a new legalism kind of way, because it's a process and we're all struggling, even from week to week, from game to game. It's going to maybe look different for us as parents, but let's go on this journey together as church people and see if we can have a different experience and remove the anxiety. Brian didn't use that word, but I'll add that to what he said. The experience of watching the game, remove the anxiety from that so we can enjoy it. And maybe even more importantly, remove the anxiety from our kids that we're creating. There still may be anxiety coming from social media or peers or coaches who we can't control. But at the very least, let's take it off the table that they're feeling a ton of anxiety from us.
Yeah.
We need to become a safe space in this sports conversation for them. And that's what we hope the book does, is it provokes that.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that vision. And this is one of those, I will say, the Lord just surprised me joyfully with, that we got to experience this year. Here's a vision: sitting around my dinner table with my son, with kids from his basketball team.
There you
from
go.
all kinds of different homes, some who don't know their dads, some who have broken homes, some who've never stepped foot in church. And we're praying together, thanking God for our meal. We're talking about our highs and lows from the day. We're talking about, what are you learning? What have you failed at? We're laughing at our failures. And we are taking these kids from the game and the field and the court, and we're bringing them into our home, and we're letting them see Jesus. Now that starts with us looking like Jesus when we're in the bleachers
Wow.
and we're on the court and we're in the field.
Yep.
That's where you get the credibility to do the other.
Yep.
But like, there are very few missional opportunities like what you get on a sports team and in a sports culture, and all of the time and effort you spend together with it. You just have to remember that it's your mission field. So guys, your book has been really encouraging to me. So I thank you for it, and highly recommend any parent in any stage of your kids are involved in sports. And look, probably the same for marching band culture when we're all, that's a pretty rabid, crazy crew as well. So, but these principles are the same. Like, it's become an industrial complex. It is a Babylon, but we don't need to sit in judgment of it. We need to look at it as the opportunity God's give us, but not look like it ourselves. So, thank you guys. And would one of you guys be willing to just pray for moms and dads as they're navigating this culture as we close out?
Go ahead, Brian.
Yep. God, we thank you for the good gift that is sport. And we thank you for giving us the ability to play it and enjoy it. And God, we lament that sport has often become what we see today, where it is this anxiety-filled space where we are using it to get something that we're trying to make an idol. But God, we pray that you would open the eyes of our hearts to come back to your true purpose for sport, and just a gift to enjoy, and that even in that enjoyment, we would begin to see opportunities to disciple. And so God, pray for the parents and those who have kids involved playing sports right now, that they would begin to watch their kids playing with a new set of eyes, that you would give them ideas for conversations around the dinner table, or even as they're putting their kids to bed at night, that you would give their kids moments in sports that would sharpen them, so that ultimately they become closer and closer to your likeness. And so we thank you again for the gift of sport. It's your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brothers.
Amen.